The morning my niece was born, I was in Berlin in the middle of an overdose. I'd asked my friend if I could stay with him because I thought if I were alone for the next 12 hours, I might kill myself. The whole thing is a blur. The month, maybe the entire summer. I remember I had just flown back from the 2017 Venice Biennale. Did not have a bad time by any means, but was sickened by the thought of returning to Berlin on a Monday morning alone to my one-room apartment. I lived by the canal. I was spoiled. I'm not even trying to defend the moment. Maybe I thought this was how fags did it. Art, parties, sudden death. Nobody ever teaches you how to die. Nobody teaches you how to fuck either, which I had not been doing much of that year, nor for some time by that point. 4 years earlier, I had been sexually assaulted. It happened in New York on a Sunday afternoon. The encounter would take me out of the game for a long but indefinite amount of time, and there was nothing I could do to shorten that amount but wait. What had I been doing those 4 years? For one, I had been on East 57th Street working in luxury advertising, the industry that manufactured the very myth that if you aren't fucking, then you aren't doing much of anything at all. Maybe it would have been fine if I had known for sure that my sexual convalescence would last just one more year, except that I didn't know this for sure. Taking drugs was the only way I could feel in control of my life at a time when the elements that had made my life make sense for me were falling away one after another. While drugs stimulate and exacerbate exactly the incapacitation that I was trying to escape, they do so in a way that's disguised as pleasure. And if you can buy into the pleasure, you can live a lot longer at half the effort until the pleasure kills you. And isn't that how we all want to die? Except I didn't really want to die. I was just tired of talking to people who had gone through worse, which made me feel like I was overreacting, or to people who did not understand the gravity of what had happened to me, which made me feel like I was overreacting, or to people who suggested I was overreacting. Even people who just said, "That's horrific," irritated me, because it wasn't that horrific compared to the two friends, male, female, who had been gang raped and hospitalized, and were gorgeous enough to tell me they knew what I was going through, but it just made me feel stupid. Immediately after the assault, I tried to steamroll over the incident, soup it up as some New York moment. In trauma, all thoughts are ad hoc. And I tried having as much sex as I could. And when it didn't work, when I couldn't perform or do much of anything at all in bed, frigid and paranoia or sudden catatonia, I knew it would be this way for a very long time. Since I was not physically injured so much as violated, the assault persisted psychologically as I worked out the trauma. A fantasy that it was all in my head and that I could reason my way out. In these narratives, in which I told myself about my own control, there was always something that could have been done. At times, I blamed myself for letting the man escalate as far as he did. At other times, I blamed myself for not wanting it more, for not turning the entire episode into one of seduction on my part, making this into a narrative of sexual ownership. Latent in the relative lack of assault narratives from adult gay men is the idea that we must have wanted this to a certain degree, maybe just a little bit. And if this is what I had to work with, I would. It was a deranged train of thought, and I knew it the whole time, but I was trying to flee a burning house. Some months later, maybe a year, I told my therapist that I could only jack off to fantasies of rape, disguised suicidal fantasies, that would morph into fantasies of getting my head bashed in with a baseball bat. Sometimes when you really don't know what it is that you desire or how you can bring your desire to the surface, you dream that someone or something will come along to make those decisions for you so you don't have to do anything at all. Being as fucked up as I was, I only felt safe in underground dark rooms, maze-like constructions designed for anonymous sex. In Berlin, I'd find them all over the city, in the basements of clubs or at bathhouses, where in near total darkness, I would wander through turns looking for someone to suck. In the all-bets-off economy of cruising, wokeness doesn't save you. Asian men rank at the bottom of the sexual hierarchy. The virtual non-existence of Asian men in gay porn tracks with the desert of desire I've detected in other men, white or otherwise. These men would either dismiss or ignore me, or at best they might assume, because of my face, that I was hungry to be used, which honestly was accurate, because I did want to be used, and then disposed of. Part of the nightly tape reel of the assault that ran in my head, playing back all the scenarios in which I could have done things differently, is the illusion that my fate was in my own hands, rather than subject to all the arbitrary forces out of my control that end up changing my life, like the sudden interest of a man wearing a fisherman's hat with beer on his breath who suggested I follow him to the bathroom and would not take no for an answer. Before the assault, I'd had a certain idea about where my writing was going, and I didn't want this event to define my career. I didn't want anyone calling me brave or healing or necessary or whatever, so I stopped writing. To distract myself, I threw myself into art openings and warehouse raves and Fashion Week after parties where I was increasingly spending my nights. The people I hung out with centered around Happy Fun Hideaway, a Bushwick dive tucked in the shadow of elevated train tracks, where the bartenders sometimes gave me free shots at the beginning of their shifts. Or at the Spectrum on Montrose, where the door person sometimes let me in for free. The scene was clubby, queer, and messy. At the club, people were identified by their race, sure, but more by their look, their attitude, their drama, their performance. It was about surface, but it was not superficial. Nobody came for the sound system because the sound system was shit and the DJs didn't care, often playing MP3s or YouTube rips, precarious audio files homespun out of the actually precarious improvisatory parties in which our queerness thrived. We worked with what we had, reappropriated top 40 club hits, deconstructed with scattered beats, shattered glass, or chopped and screwed vocals on loop. A sound that journalists eventually termed deconstructed club, which became like hipster, a term everyone would immediately disavow upon being described as such. I loved the scene and loved it hard. If at sex parties my race made me invisible, I found the opposite to be true at the club. I knew that if I could learn how to dance, I could demand to be seen. In Jenny Livingston's 1990 ballroom documentary, Paris is Burning, the choreographer Willie Ninja's apartment is shown decorated with porcelain statues from Asia. He even uses his namesake, Ninja, to describe his moves, and at one point says, "I would really like to take my whole house and go to Japan and have them accept it there." These cultural coordinates were far more sophisticated than anything I could easily navigate. Through the ballroom's self-aware exotification of East Asian culture in the 80s, I learned to come into Asian culture and perform it back to the club. I learned to use my hands, which are large, like Chinese fans attached at the wrist that I could flutter around my head. At the club, I never knew what I looked like, except at Spectrum, where, because of all the mirrors, I could watch my form and do some serious damage on the floor. When the strobes came on, I pretended not to notice people watching. It was exhilarating, because nowhere outside the club did I ever command this attention. It was the height of the culture wars, and I had learned how to vogue, which I found funny and passive-aggressive. Whenever people asked me at the club if I was voguing, I would say, "I'm not appropriating anyone's fucking culture. I'm doing Tai Chi." Obviously, I was carrying. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Clearly, I don't want to talk about the assault anymore. Self-pity gets tiring. How do you believe in your own value after you've been so devalued by violence? I act like my friends weren't there to help me. What a disservice to all those people who were there. This is my tribute to all those who knew but didn't know, who just got it, who didn't have to ask, who instead went shopping with me for skirts at the Kleidermarkt, who answered my crisis texts, took care of the cats when I was spiraling, who sat me down and said I wasn't insane and all my self-diagnosed psychoses were capitalist control systems, who said a majority of gay people don't even do anal penetration because wasn't the whole point of the queer project to reject the hetero indoctrination of intercourse as procreation defined by basic-ass Christians who prioritize progeny over pleasure? You were the ones who recorded us talking for 4 hours straight before I moved to Berlin and then got Celestial Tracks to sample it years later in Copenhagen. Before then, I hated my voice because it sounds faggy. Now, I love my voice because it sounds faggy. Self-love is something you have to be shown, and you showed me how. I'm being serious. It isn't that bad, my life. Sorry, I don't want anyone thinking I was a privileged faggot having too much fun, even though I just said so and have the pictures to prove it. I never had that Asian party I kept talking about because all y'all were too busy flying around the fucking world, and if the whole family couldn't be there at the same time, then what was the point? The closest we ever came was at Yngve Holland's studio party that was technically happening for some other reason, which became irrelevant once our whole Asian crew showed up and occupied the place. YB and Mobile Girl were doing back-to-back, and we snorted lines up and down the stairwell and danced on the tables in front of the DJ booth, and, because the cops shut down the party, we're all in bed by 3 and got shit done the next day. Whoever gave us permission to be so extra? I don't know why I'm telling you all this. Sometimes life was bad, and sometimes it wasn't, and sometimes it just was. Basic presence. There isn't a point to this, at least not any more than there is ever a point to suffering, or to life itself, for that matter. Your existence justifies itself. You don't need a reason. That's the thing. You never need a reason.
Which is how I got over it. I don't know when, but this period I'm talking about did eventually end. I woke up one day and realized it was over, or even had been for some time. Life went on, I went on. My niece was born, and she was named after my grandmother. Mostly I try to make meaning out of the events until it becomes too painful. And then I just take it as it is. I like to tell myself that. Just keep going, babes, you're on the right track. For most of what I remember from this period, I was so happy I could die. Thanks.
Hi. This is from Club Space. Jewel tries to shadow a soft butch crab dancing low to the floor. I flirt with Tiger, who leaves with Bunny. Between us is a heaven. It is Paradise's set. Everything starts when Jewel puts their head on my shoulder. They have candy flipped, and I am with Molly Bloom, yes. It's hard to know who's on the inside and who's on the outside, whether the living bury the dead or the dead bury the living. I have unfastened from belonging to anything but art. When Jewel puts their head on my shoulder, I come into the world because Aja is playing. I alight in tiger light, a lipstick bibliomancy, public sex for girls. I draw a red edge. Everyone in this room is inside it. I bring Jewel inside it. The music signals ecstasy to start, a whole holly sled with bells. We are together in the glee and weather, 1,000 years of history present instantaneously. All meaning is made here and left here on the dance floor. This is not love, this is not sex, this is ecstasy. Black fingerless gloves, leather waist wrap, girlish tears of tulle, cowboy hat, metallic skirt, turbo boots with large buckles knee to ankle, plaid skirt, corset, posture collar, large jacket, sneakers, loose tee, complicated primitivist mesh, Morticia dress, schoolgirl skirt, black hair, white tee, dog collar, high platinum pony, long black lace, black lipstick, a forehead jewel, heels, a bit of wire, an old rag of velveteen, a lion tamer's costume with diamond studs, a curling carriage whip and a fake revolver, a ducky little temituque with a bird of paradise wing in it, a quill between the teeth, the aureole of a straw hat, a bunch of grapes dangling in one hand, the other holding a telephone receiver to one ear, a coin gleaming on the forehead, on the feet jeweled toe rings, ankles linked by a slender fetter chain, scarlet trousers, jacket slashed with gold, white yashmak, violet in the night, leaving free only her large dark eyes and raven hair. Bloom. Molly. At the club tonight, I meet Xavier. I stand at the edge of the dance floor in a pink bandeau bodice laced up with pink rope. I am Strawberry, bitchily commenting aloud as two men push past. They have disregarded my magnetic field with the dance floor. Tall androgyne in angst koala eyes, someone moving fast in lots of kawaii ruffles, black latex tank top, short bleached hair. The aqueous dance floor is my gorgeous hydra lover. Xavier is suddenly next to me saying, "Wanna go dance?" With lightness I receive as beleaguered exquisiteness, his sunrise smile wending into goth night. I learn they does not like men. They are trying to tell me their sexual preference, but I hear it as conspiratorial. The black shirt I had been wearing gets accidentally yanked from the left back of my miniskirt. I'm flagging, I tell X, tongue out like a child's. I spot a swath of black mesh fall into the floor. I pick it up, tie it over my eyes. I dance behind this reverse blindfold, watching Xavier's body dance. He throws Vogue arms. I get consent and wind the mesh around his wrists. The dancing this lets out is astounding. He twists his wrists, shows them off. The energy is wild, aggressively hot. I dance behind, around, above. I make a space, protecting and enclosing my sudden new creature. Sped into lowness in the direction of the moon. It's always been best for me here, where flagellates and spermatozoa. The wind, the light, the noise of a sub-city. I am jacking a form of moving through time that is underneath bureaucracies of difference, where singularities leave the dance floor like animals going extinct. I text Jewel from the bathroom. Ecstasy is an eye that sees in all directions. I fall to memory or reverie. I sucked my thumb, they fucked me from behind. I walked into the room, they were playing with the dildo. I kneeled and pushed it in with my hips. I slapped their face, I fingered their O-ring. I sat atop the radiator to which they were handcuffed. I spread my legs as they looked up. They bit my nipples through my dress. I curled into them at the side of the rave, realized it was our last, cried. They topped me like a boy. I squealed and shouted. I pushed them back on the bed, their head dangling over the edge. I moved up and down their sea. They caught the reflection of their face in the half-moon mirror I'd placed on the floor. They licked my sea. I said it was all I'd ever wanted. Just you and all the riches of the trees. Almost anything will bend to you. You will bend to almost anything. On the dance floor between the hours of 3 and 4 a.m., light radiates up her spine. Around her body, gold concupiscent rays. She is watched by the invalid sun as a baby is watched by their mother. A nest of red is pulsating always around her head. She stretches out at the soft mouth of ecstasy. Now she is glowing golden. Gold travels outward, meets her perimeter, and emanates, increasing her size. Her entire body slides over thick hibiscus. She is moving as if in seawater, caves of colored stones, eyes that flash. She pulls herself up onto the bank, legs flexed. I love the shadow world more than thee, her one thought. A choir of aquatic plants gives praise. Giant white lily pad flowers open slightly. She's hunting gently. She begins to climb, heroic in overcoming everything that is not pleasure. A dragonfly climbs higher than it's ever flied. All fauna and foliage is combed back and sated, sleepy and submissive as her feet return to ground. Between 4 and 5 a.m., a spontaneous piano staircase rises through the music, climbs up and over a waterfall. It flows like a rainbow from yellowed bright ground. The beat is seeking, a feminine melodica shaking her hair from her eyes, sending morning up and out through a peephole. The scalloped rhythm of the coming day, the sun, fans of orange, huge phonograph barnacles flowering underwater. We are being taken through by a woman's voice. She is guiding us. Small, incompactable, wrapped, vaporous, metabolizing, impactable. The curve of us flexes intricately around beauty, a lemon stolen from a tree. We are an asophile turned the other way round to enter with each other an idea which is a sound. Jewel texts, femininity deincarnates the present. Each consciousness goes up and down. The sea is not messy. The moon is music. A curved ocean, yellow on green, blue striped, piles or pylons, an announcement to turn the head of sorrow. The sun has disrobed for us. We are inside the total withdrawal of the visible. We dance, infinity squandered, dropped over the ocean like a library dropping into a pool. Between the hours of 5 and 6 a.m., the sound is inside sea glass. The sea glass washes out with the tide, then comes back in a different color. All the rays of the sun, every single one, move through this room. Light projections on the radial ceiling slope over us where we dance. This beat sets the law as it builds. I am turned on by the illegality of change. I feel like crawling, some combination of a jaguar and a wolf. I'm in a plaid schoolgirl skirt and a black crop top. This beat is braying, then whining, then churning. This beat is losing, no, never losing, but for a minute gets lost. Who is playing? Bravely. Music is the objectification of time, I think, in full words to later text to Jewel, the thought riding atop a fully formed theory of change. Dionysus enters. I press my hands together, rub, stop at my solar plexus, project power outward, move them down, knees bent, hands together low, phallic. I become elephant, trunk to the ground, sensing. Then the music splits to butterflies. They escape around the top of my body. I have 3 heads in this sound. We are inside a terrarium of color. Morning is bound at the waist by a tight plastic sash topped by 2 breasts caged in plastic, blue stockinged legs ending in tall blue platform shoes. She still wears the smudgy trace of the rose-black ice lip gloss of night. She spits a silver wad of moon into the ocean. I step outside. My hair is in 2 French braids. Oh, the fig trees in the Alameda gardens, yes, and all the queer little streets and pink and blue and yellow houses, yes, and the rose gardens and the jessamine and geraniums and cactuses, yes. I come into day as if into form. The needle is no longer on the groove of my thoughts. My narrative is not delimited by the words I know how to say. I am called to the occasion of this sea, which swallows the hot day in its foment of green, vaguely an age, vaguely a gender. In atmospheric drop, I'm a sailor coming back to land, ridiculous, ancient, triumphant, invigorated by stupidity and sounds. My life right now is an archipelago of raves. Tonight I dress easily, tight under bustier and opaque black tights. I step out at 12:15 a.m. to drive over the back highway and into the forest. This rave is thrown by girls. I flashlight my way down to the clearing, an animal skull mask, a latex leotard, a skirt over a skirt, 2 lovers, both with blonde braids. I dance behind them as they kiss. In my blonde braids, I become their shadow, or their child, or their desirer, or them. The feminine is a field of imagination, I text Jewel in my mind, to be unmoored, to be attached to almost anything good enough. Dissolving like sweet fruit, I am alive in this defunded shape. I dart to my way through bunchings of decorate, warm bodies up the path to the altar. It is made of 4 levels of candles, votives at the base, eggs grottoed in, sprigs of baby's breath, a ceramic rabbit icon, a three-tiered fountain with falling water. What are the vials? Estrogen. Every measure is linked to a form of power I transmit to Jewel. She thinks back. Sound teaches me the inconclusiveness of time. We are celebrating Easter. The next day will be the first warm one, the day after the spring equinox. Thanks.
Reading a little from Raving, which you can acquire just over there if you would like one. $15.95, and it has color pictures. I mean, what else can I tell you? Yeah, when are you ready? Nice and loud. We go to sleep early, to get up early, to go to the rave. It's 4 a.m. We eat light, get caffeine in our bodies, drop some edibles, pick outfits. We wear light jackets. It's spring, but not warm yet. We pack rave bags, check for the location, call a car. Dark streets, indigo night, shiny stars. Doorman knows us, love his energy. We're in. Our glasses fog up. We can't see anything. We hear everything, feel everything. We bring a bin liner for jackets. We bag the jackets and hide them. We greet friends and hug them. We buy water, we put in earplugs. We're ready. We always go to the front. We like the feel of the sub-bass. We like the breeze off the big bin. We try to find that place in movement. It takes a while. We go into sound, we let sound into flesh. We're moving, but we're not quite there. We hate everyone around us. All the other humans are annoying as fuck. You are all so annoying. You have your phone out. You are talking loudly. You won't let the beat in, won't let it fuck you. You are smoking a cigarette. You are joined at the hip, the couple form, ignoring all others, zagging across the room like a Roomba. You're all so annoying. At first, we try a different spot. It's better over here, less annoying. Now it feels good, not annoying at all. Everyone here is dancing. We're all dancing. Dancing is all we are. We sense each other's bodies around and let a little of each other in. We're in this together, whatever this is. It's a time where everything is a friend. How long have we been here? How long are we dancing? How did we get here into this other wave? We're in a pocket in time where there's more time. We're in a sideways time that spools off a slant. We go into the weightless days, seconds, millennia. On the other side of the measure of beats is a time without measure. We're in a time of dissociation. Not the bad kind, the good kind. We go out of this world. Those thoughts are still here. They don't bother us. Those feelings are still here. They don't bother us. This body is still here. We can endure this gendered flesh. We go hard. We're gone. Then we are back. How long were we out of this gravity time? I don't care to know. We're thirsty, we're tired, we ache, we take a break, we get water, we eat the chocolate bar we always bring, the one with coffee and hazelnuts. We find a spot to sit. We make out, we kiss, we touch each other's sweat and flesh. We sense the heat, the vapor of bodies. We feel the bodies all around us, separate yet here, swirling into the same air, fog and sweat. It's hot, we fan ourselves, we rest. We go again, we dance again, we are gone again, into the sideways time, the sidereal time, out of orbit. We drift away from ourselves into that other time. We are away with the edgeways tide. We forget. We have a lot to forget. We have time to forget. We have a world to forget, a world in pain. The whole world has dysphoria. We go out of the world and into its crooked seasons. We go to another. We go to the era between one beat and the next beat. We love techno because the beats come so fast. There's so much more of that slanted other time folded in there. We feel the light changing. Daylight is coming. Through a hole in the curtain, we feel a beam of that cursed sun finger us. We dance some more and then stop. We're out walking the streets of Brooklyn. We are in this big sky. We have electric skin. We see birds flocking. We see the bird rave in the early light. When the birds rave, they don't even bump into each other. We're back now. We close the curtains. We drink water, eat raspberries and pistachios. We peel off Wraith's clothes, those sweated rags. We don't shower. We lie in bed. We touch. Retired flesh, flesh without tension, flesh work free from labor, from care. We play ambient music. We go into the ambient time. It's also a time where there's more time. A different one though. A lasting where mammals breathe technical air. Ambient time. A time that isn't between beats. Maybe there aren't any beats. It's a time that opens when the sound becomes a space and the space has another duration. A sideways time too, but the other sideways. A slantwise time. We tour and touch in these moments. We're in the air of this little room lit with candles and fairy lights. There's art on the wall by our friends. There's books on the shelves by our friends. There's sound in the air by our friends. They can't see us or hear us or read us. It's a different kind of rave. We don't have much time. We go into this turn, ooze into this calling. We are here, we are healing, we are home. We go to sleep early, to get up early, to go to the rave. It's 4 a.m. We eat light, get caffeine in our bodies, drop some edibles, pick outfits. We pack rave bags, check for the location, call a car. Rainy night, the sky, a dark grey hoodie. Doorman knows us. Hi, we're in. Our glasses fog up. We can't see anything. We hear everything, feel everything. We greet friends and hug them. We forget to buy water. We put in earplugs. We're ready. We always go to the front. We go into the sound. We let sound into flesh. We're moving, but we're not quite there. We hate everyone around us. We try a different spot. Now it feels good. How did we get here? Among these swerving particles. We're in a pocket in time where there's more time. We go into the weightless days, seconds, millennia. On the other side of the pleasure of beasts is a time without measure. We forget. We have a lot to forget. We go out of the world and its wonky seasons. We go to the era between one breath and the next breath. We make out, we kiss, we touch each other's sweat and flesh. We sense the heat, the vapor of bodies. It's hot. We have to get used to this heat. We dance some more and then stop. We call a car from the rave. We are the passengers. We ride and we ride. We see Brooklyn's ripped back sides. We see the streets from under glass. We see the silent, hollow sky. We're back now. We close the curtains. We lie in bed. We are tired flesh. Flesh work free from labor. We play ambient music. We go into ambient time, this slightwise time. We tend and tease in these moments. We are in the air of this little room, lit with candles and fairy lights. This other kind of rave. We don't have much time. We go into this turn, seep into its calling. We are here, we are healing, we are home. Thank you.
The worst party I've ever been to that claimed to be a rave was a Hurricane Harvey fundraiser organized by the Democratic Socialists of America. I went with the friend who had introduced me to raving the year before. We were part of the wave of 20-somethings who joined DSA out of desperation after the 2016 election. The party was thrown by the Posadist Caucus, which was named after a fringe Trotskyist movement from the 1970s that believed the revolution would begin when aliens living in highly advanced communist societies finally visited Earth. They had called it a rave, but the lights were fluorescent overheads, and they were not playing techno, which was even more strange, given that the Belleville 3 invented techno to soundtrack the future. It seemed like no one who planned the party had even been to a rave. "We would have done this way better," my friend whispered to me. "It's so embarrassing." We took a selfie with the alien and left after 20 minutes. I felt some tenderness for the Posadists, though. They were looking for the same reprieve from the exhaustion of late capitalism that I had begun experiencing at raves. I briefly became a proselytizer there, bringing my friends from DSA to parties to show them this place that had jolted me with energy I didn't know I needed. They stood frozen all night, like goats about to faint. For them, the space felt confusing, not liberatory. It was my turn to discover what every raver eventually finds out. The rave is not for everyone. So I went looking for politics at the rave instead. I read about the field raves in Britain in the early 1990s that in retrospect have been interpreted as revolts against Margaret Thatcher's austerity policies. I read about how Berghain started as an anarchist squat amidst the rubble of the Berlin Wall. I read a history of electronic music that described illegal free raves as the ideal temporary autonomous zone. Everyone I gravitated toward at parties ended up having politics similar to mine. We took Molly together, and once we'd said I love you, we spent the rest of our roles talking about how we saw the seeds of revolution at the rave. I began to assume that most people I was dancing with were there because they also experienced the magic time between yesterday and tomorrow as a secret place to try out more liberated ways of living. I'd found my political home, or so I thought. I began learning that most people at the rave were actually not politicized, and that they were not there for the same reasons I was. In 2018, my favorite festival started the same night as the New York gubernatorial election, and despite promising myself I wouldn't do it, I kept taking breaks from the dance floor to check the election returns. A stranger asked why I was on my phone when there was such a nice party happening right there, and I told him, and he responded, "There's an election happening?" 2 years later, during the peak of the Black Lives Matter uprising, I ran into the founder of the festival at a backyard party. She told me that until that month, June of 2020, she'd never paid attention to the news. She was 37. And I began to understand that for most people, raving is actually just a party, not the utopian project I'd convinced myself we were all trying out. It wasn't that I wanted to go up to every person at the rave and yell over the music, "Can you believe Eric Adams wants to cut the library budget by $30 million when the NYPD has already spent its overtime budget by $100 million and the year's not even over?" But I wanted to feel comfortable doing that if I was compelled. I'm thinking about these, it's ridiculous, right? Like, oh my God. I'm thinking about these sorts of things all the time because I want to be part of changing them. And I think about them in a different way on the dance floor at 5 a.m. because the rules are different, and so I don't have to make what I'm thinking fit into daytime expectations. In the sunlight, my politics harden and sometimes take on a defensive, somber tone. But in that magic pocket of time, the hammer of the beat cracks my shell. Pure truths float out unbounded by justification. The sheer needlessness of the brutality of the world outside is something I can feel in my body instead of just turning it over in my brain. I want everyone to experience this militant joy of not giving up. I want them to join me in imagining that the closed fists of our dance moves are punches aimed at the faces of cops. I felt a profound sadness that so few ravers wanted to share this. Around the same time I accepted that I could not force politics onto the rave, I learned that the founder of a radical organizing space where I was spending increasing amounts of time had been learning how to DJ before he died in a collision on the drive back from Standing Rock. He'd apparently become convinced that transformational change would only be possible if it included parties. The rave needed to come to politics, not the other way around. That fall, a friend from Montreal posted a video of his DJ set in a forest in Atlanta. It looked like the kind of magnificent renegade rave that is impossible to pull off now in the police state of New York City. And it turned out the rave was about the police. Specifically, that the police in Atlanta were trying to cut down a forest to build an enormous training facility for practicing militarized operations in a mock town. People from across the country had started living in the forest to block the construction of the facility, which they called Cop City. Ravers in Atlanta had helped start the protest movement, and they had studied the same history of political raving that enchanted me all those years ago. So they insisted on having parties all the time. Toward the end of 2021, the encampment grew into a real-life temporary autonomous zone with many tents, a kitchen, a first aid station, and 275-gallon water tanks. It survived the winter and then the spring. In June, a call echoed across social media and private Signal group chats. Come to Atlanta for a week in July and see what it's like to actually live in the world we say we want to build. The main entrance was marked by a sign nailed to a pine tree. You are now leaving the USA. On the Saturday night of the week in July, it was illuminated by glow sticks that continued onto the forest floor, marking a path to a clearing sheltered by an enormous blue tarp. Underneath, nearly 100 people danced. Very few of them looked like ravers, but they were raving hard after many days of talks, workshops, and whisper network projects to sabotage the construction site. The speakers were fuzzy and blasting a UK garage edit of I Ain't Got You by Alicia Keys. As twilight fell, even more people showed up, teenagers and wooks and punks, punctuating the DJ sets with cries of Stop Cop City. Someone who I'd met on a hike earlier that day came up to me, wide-eyed, and told me the bar was out of water, but he was rolling too hard to carry anything heavy, so could he show me how to do it? I followed him to the water tanks, where he explained, with a little difficulty, how the system worked, and then handed me an office cooler water jug and walked away. This is how temporary autonomous zones work. No one's in charge, so everyone has to help out, and once you know how to do something, you teach someone else, kind of like a renegade rave. When I walked for a second time onto the dance floor, the water jug sloshing around in my arms, I began to cry. For the past 3 years, I had been working around Brooklyn as a safer spaces monitor, a job that involves doing whatever's necessary to make sure everyone has a good time at the rave, whether that's giving someone earplugs or kicking out some drunk guy who's harassing people. I loved the job because it was an expression of my politics, evidence that we can take care of our own communities without the police, that we can create a safe container to experiment with altered states of mind, that being assaulted should not be part of the price of admission for a night out. Free water is the baseline requirement for a party to be a safer space. So of all the tasks someone could have handed me that night, there was none more meaningful than bringing water to that rave. It had been over a year since I stopped believing that raves were intrinsically temporary autonomous zones, but to rave in an actual temporary autonomous zone seemed to bring out all the latent political potential of the rave. 4 months after that rave, the police arrested 6 forest defenders and charged them with domestic terrorism for refusing to leave the trees when ordered to do so. 2 months after that, the police killed a forest defender named Tortuguita during a raid, then charged 4 more people with domestic terrorism. In March, the police raided a music festival near the forest and charged 28 people with domestic terrorism. There was supposed to be a rave that night, but it didn't happen. Repression like this is meant to stop a movement. But what the cops don't seem to understand is that when we raved in the forest, we saw what was possible, felt in our bodies a defiance of their lie that the world they impose on us is the only option. Politics starts with this defiance, with no. No, we will not let Cop City be built. No, we do not recognize your authority to drag our lives even closer to hell. No, things can be different. My politics, what keeps me going, is the yes. Yes, there is a future where the police cannot turn our forests into training grounds for learning how to kill more of us more easily. Yes, we will keep fighting for that future, no matter what they do. And yes, there will be raves in that future because we will have so much to celebrate. Thank you.
Hi. Let's start with a joke. What is the difference between an angel and a ghost? Good lighting. What is the difference? Oh! What is the difference between an angel and a ghost? BPM. Angels like it groovy, smooth. Ghosts like glitchy gabber shit. What is the difference between an angel and a ghost? A pill. The angel knew what she was taking in the gunky bathroom stall. The ghost didn't bother to ask and must suffer the consequences. When I think about nightlife, the first thing that comes to mind is karaoke bars. Have you ever thought of karaoke as a form of benevolent possession? Letting our bodies be channels for the voices of strangers, often dead, always untouchable. So much of what we call nightlife is actually a way to make the immaterial material, to corporealize the vaporous or faint. A party is a seance in a less comfortable room. One more time. What is the difference between an angel and a ghost? Proximity to the disco ball. Ghosts prefer corners, dark rooms, smoking areas crowded by bare-armed daddies who refuse to look cold. Meanwhile, angels boogie towards the light. They didn't put on highlighter for nothing. Anyone touched by the disco ball's light is suddenly sacred. Behold the hallowed ground of collarbones. Object lesson of a disco ball, an essay that I never wrote. There's something mystic about a fog machine, both primordial and extraterrestrial, swaddling bodies in states of pretty disarray. How nice to watch the body disappear, leaving behind only bracelets and teeth. Gay bar dance floor, one of the only places where exaltation and decay coexist. The swishing of ghosts keeps us cool. On a certain far-off dance floor packed with sweaty bodies, I find myself awestruck by a wiry muscle gaze expert use of his fan. You know, big paper fan that he snaps to the beat, snaps to the beat. He fans the dancers around him, and the sudden artificial breeze is like a miracle. And I find myself thinking that some people are simply anointed to know what to do with a fan in a crowd. But sometimes parties are like that, where you look around and everyone is the saint of something, no matter how grimy or low. Saint of the gurn, saint of hard nipples, saint of stupid tattoos, saint who talks to you about real estate and reality TV during your K-hole, saint of the elderly cross-dressers, saint of the purple plastic miniskirt that melts upon contact, etc. I encounter two boys so heavily tattooed that their skin color is indistinguishable, or is that the fog machine's trickery, wreathing them in purple blue? They lock eyes with a devastatingly sexy man, biceps like bread loaves in a sweat-soaked wife beater, and all three freeze in shock. Then they leap into each other's arms, laughing, crying, long-lost brothers or lovers. When at last they untangle, one boy turns to me and says with tears in his eyes, "This is my tattoo artist." Shall we contemplate the propulsive lack behind going out? The dance floor as a space to get in touch with your holes. I stopped dancing once I fell in love. It's not quite true, but it sounds nice. Dance floor as a surrogate honeymoon. DJ as a tall, dark stranger, repositioning your body to his liking. Lana sings, "If this is the end, then I want a boyfriend." One of the best lines of 21st century poetry ever written. When I was alone, the dance floor was my bedroom, as in a space to defile, get off, have fun, be bad. Bed as that most private zone that we nevertheless allow strangers to defile. The dance floor as a bedroom, but with better lighting, with bartenders as witness. Just like a dance floor, a bed is always full of ghosts. But then again, what defines a ghost? Ghosts come back from the dead because they have unfinished business. A party dog is perhaps similarly consumed by unfinished business, hence the almost compulsive need to go out, to populate the night, to seek heat, distraction, whatever. Tonight is the night, they scream, hyping themselves up. What are we waiting for? The final countdown? Even in love, certain holes remain unplugged. The most common human experience is to long alone. Sad music, electric blanket, the nubby pajamas your lovers don't see. Ready, set, long. On a dance floor, longing is social. It's communal and generative. Like it or not, it's the reason for the season. Everyone's flashing their broken hearts. I love the public hunger of dancing, our need twinkling like Christmas lights. Do you ever hear words in the bass repeated like spells in the unsk, 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 like extraterrestrial messages being transmitted to Earth? On a certain dance floor, I heard, God is good, God is good. Then, GHB, GHB. Finally, spironolactin, spironolactin. My dance partner says he doesn't hear it, but smiles politely. I used to hear messages all the time in the bass at the stud. So what if we were receiving alien frequencies on the gay bar dance floor? I can think of no better space for transmission of otherworldly codes than this foggy purple plane, our bodies limp, our boundaries weakened. Is that the party dog's anointed task? To be the recipient of different and sometimes challenging vibrations? Or is it just to cheek kiss and look sexy, which is, in my opinion, an equally holy endeavor? If I were to meet an alien, I think he would look in some ways like a synth sounds. Stretchy, long, expansive. This is one of many drug thoughts best kept to myself, such as, hot girls have stuffed animals on their beds, this is a fact. So we agree, a dance floor is otherworldly. It is a site for temporary lovers, past selves, forgotten futures, all layered together in a weird tiramisu. Lineup of party dogs. Australian K-dealing crossdresser with the word celibate tattooed across his knuckles. Never forget his smeared tabletop, the tropical plants in his bathroom that scared me. Moving on, Salome, who wore curtains to the club. Gina with no underwear. Jackie tracking steps. An Italian twink who borrowed my lip plumper and bellowed, "Bellissima!" Is there any higher compliment than a fucked up twink calling you hot? I think not. I tried to explain that the lip gloss might tingle or sting because of the lip plumping toxins, but he wasn't prepared. Oh well. So many bodies I found beautiful, significant, and rare are little more than ghosts to me now. We grooved in tandem, that was all. And yet, it felt like a revelation, a fogged intimacy. Medical condition of a lip flip, medical condition of a beat drop, medical condition of a broken heart. Bit by bit, we inch closer to heaven.
Am I getting too old for this shit? Music is my first love, the single ordering principle of my whole life. All I can really remember about falling in love are the first. Like the first time when I was 8, found a cassette tape player that my sister, nearly a decade older, had brought home early in the 90s. Titled Rave Till Dawn, it featured a selection of first-wave Belgian hardcore and breakbeat tracks whose raw, frenetic sounds pressed a searing brand into my juvenile brain. Growing up in the suburbs as I did, this tape was a portal into another world, one I had no idea existed, but that I desperately needed to know more about. I listened in secret after borrowing it or stealing it, and sequestering myself away in my bedroom. I felt a vivid, all-encompassing sense that by listening, I was engaged in some sort of illicit act, that there was something forbidden and uncouth in this music. It was too brazen. Something inherent in its very sound seemed against the law. I felt as if I had been struck by a lightning bolt, and though I couldn't have known it at the time, I would be chasing that dragon ever after. Then there was the first time I went to a club. I had just returned to the Bay Area after school in Ontario, Canada, my first time living out of the Bay. Though I had spent years immersing myself in dance music, learning whatever history I could find on the internet, picking and bootlegging favorite tracks, I had never been to a rave. I didn't understand what it meant to go dancing, which in my mind was something only people who went to their high school prom did. I was well versed in the multitudes of electronic music in my head, but I was lacking its most fundamental education in the body. At the time, I had just gotten out of a breakup, and my friend John suggested we attend a night called Warm Leatherette, named after the iconic post-punk song, at a spot I'd never heard of called Coco's near Geary and Franklin. It's gone now, but back then, it was a nondescript dive with taps and bottles and disinterested bartenders serving a motley crowd of local barflies, men wearing 49ers jerseys, and groups of friends celebrating one thing or another. Off in the corner, I spotted my people immediately. A group of 10 or 15 crowded around a couple turntables, blasting wiry synth-punk records to the local disinterest of the rest of the bar. Clad in black, they were arrayed in head to toe with subcultural signifiers that I spent my teenage years chasing after in search of a personality. I lingered nearby with John awkwardly. Both of us were terminal internet addicts and had spent the majority of our lives socializing online, to the severe detriment of our interpersonal skills. But a few drinks loosened us up, and we joined the group and met new people. Even though I hadn't heard any of the records the DJs were playing, they felt intimately familiar, like I had already encountered them in a dream. Each track was riddled with a manic, nervous energy of punk, but carried by an infectious electronic groove, like the EBM and proto-techno I had known and loved growing up. I had stumbled upon some kind of missing link. Toward the end of the night, one of the DJs played the Dutch electro anthem Space Invaders Are Smoking Grass, a track I had only ever heard of at home by myself, but never on a night out, and certainly never in this context, sandwiched between a raucous, wavy songs by disaffected European youth. Suddenly I got it. The track sounded different, felt different, and I was gripped by an unfamiliar energy. Listening among this tiny crowd of weirdos I had just met, I got what I had been missing out on, what I had lost by sitting at home with headphones. That music is so much more than an art form. It's a social binder, an oral glue that brings people together and ties them up in community. I went up to the DJ and thanked him, told him I loved this track, that I had never heard it mixed with any of others like these before. He told me his name, Nihar. He was tall and deftly bearded with an unhinged fringe of curly hair, like Jack Nance from Eraserhead if Jack Nance were brown. And he wore a torn and faded t-shirt bearing the insignia of some punk metal band I had never heard of. That he was a DJ, even just a hobbyist, seemed thrillingly cool to me and shockingly accessible. In my naive mind, DJs were mythical figures, the stuff of legend. DJing was the province of Jeff Mills or Richie Houghton, people whose mix CDs I'd find for sale in the racks at Amoeba. But I had it all wrong, of course. It was the amateurs who always ran the show. I didn't know it then, but Nihar would become one of my best friends and longest-running music collaborators. More and more would appear the deeper I immersed myself in the local scene. Soon came my first underground parties, literally underground, beneath a curio shop on 24th, in the basement of an illegal club on 6th, down some horrifically unsafe stairs on 17th and Cap, At these spots, I danced myself into a stupor for the first time. I stayed till the lights came on, and then time and time again. At these spots, I shared a kiss on the dance floor for the first time. One night after Icy Hot at the Loft at Public Works was done, Jenna dragged me into a warehouse several blocks north on Mission Street, where she and I embraced one another amongst hundreds of sweaty, harness-bound men, all of us pulsing as one solid mass past 4 a.m. And at these spots, I did drugs for the first time, moon rocks or so they said, and I ended the night being driven around in the back of a van containing dozens of CRT TVs that had lit up the party just hours before, laughing myself into oblivion. Eventually, I played my first DJ set. Because I spent so long without ever really going out, my relationship with DJing was abstracted too. It had never occurred to me that I might try it out myself. But my friends kept telling me, you like a bunch of good music and you should play it out sometime. And I realized it really is that simple. That night, I took the stage and played a series of records to a very small crowd for the very first time. I insisted on mixing vinyl, the mark of an insecure amateur, and I train-wrecked half the mixes, lacking in both confidence and technical skill. But on a few cuts, I nailed the timing just right, seamlessly blending one track with another. It felt like alchemy. Looking out amongst the meager crowd, I saw wonder on their faces, the joy of musical discovery happening in real time. I was hooked. Not long after, I took the next logical step. I started a new party for the first time with my newfound friends. I'd been going to a Warm Leatherette for years and had befriended all the DJs. For months, I sent them techno tracks I thought would fit amongst their usual post-punk and minimal synth selections. The one that really landed was a squirrely acid roller by Case Grain and Tin Man called Athletic. When they played it out, it was clear the vibe had shifted. Soon enough, I was sitting for brunch at an Irish pub on 22nd and Guerrero with Nihar, Jason, Justin, Andreas, and Damon, chatting through the vision of a techno party that possessed the raw, punkish energy that Warm Leatherette did. And I suggested a new name, Surface Tension. It stuck, and we were all in. In a DJ set, you rarely hear the beginning of a track, usually just the middle when it's already come into its own. In the beginning, nobody in San Francisco knew who I was, but in the span of a few years, I had gone from die-hard raver to amateur DJ to party promoter. I wrote a weekly dance music column in SF Weekly and had bylines in Accelerator, Resident Advisor, and Red Bull Music Academy. My social circle expanded even wider until I, a lifelong shut-in, had more acquaintances than I knew what to do with. For the first time in my life, I had become a somebody. Thinking back, those days seem hardly real. Hollowed out after the comorbid crashes of 2008, the city was bursting at the seams with stylish, creative people everywhere I looked. Rent wasn't exactly cheap, but we made it work. Everyone I met was a musician, an artist, a photographer, or a designer. Everyone worked at a bar, a restaurant, a gallery, or a clothing store. There were parties every weekend in houses and backyards and lofts and clubs that had just opened. Neighborhoods were rife with happening and buzzing with collaborative, productive energy. For a while at least, Surface Tension stood alone in San Francisco. We curated the party without compromise, seeking a common thread between the chaotic weirdness of experimental music and the kinetic dynamism of dance music. We mixed crowds, scenes, and sounds, building lineups you'd never find anywhere else in the city. It didn't always work out. Sometimes both audiences and venues alike were bewildered by what we put on stage. But when the energy was on, we pierced the veil between noise and techno, art and club. In the meantime, I earned a steady stream of gigs, but I was paid just barely enough to keep my head above water. It was fueled by the sense that my lucky break would come, if the right people read my writing maybe, or I just made the right connections. In my spare time, I dreamt about trading the exhaustive freelance grind for a stable creative career. What that looked like, I couldn't have told you, but I believed if I worked hard enough and put that time in, I would find my big break. But the grind wore me down, and the crushing weight of my own jadedness became harder and harder to ignore. It felt like every booking, every event, every endeavor was a numbers game. Okay, how many were gonna get through the door, and will they drink enough to clear the bar minimum? I began to understand the music business as effectively a subsidiary of the alcohol business. And I began to ask myself, what am I doing this for? Each passing month, another friend or connection would depart for Berlin, New York, Los Angeles. In their stead came transplants new to the city, wearing Allbirds and backpacks emblazoned with their employers' logos, lining up on street corners to board gleaming white double-decker chariots that ferried them down 280 to corporate campuses where they built out our new world with wireframes and code. Along with them came ads in BART stations and on Muni buses featuring phrases like onboarding, development, and enterprise-level security. One day in the cafe where I did my writing, I noticed a curious plastic contraption with phone charging cables emerging in every which way like anime tentacles. A startup was selling subscriptions to charge your phone. Never mind that this cafe was flush with outlets visitors could use for free. In another cafe, an old school place run by a Vietnamese family, I went to use the bathroom only to discover its traditional wooden door had been replaced by a metal one, institutional looking, but painted a jarring lime green with a bulging hotel-style lock. Some other startup was paying local cafes around the city who were struggling with skyrocketing costs of doing business to commandeer their bathrooms, charging patrons a subscription fee to use them. Rent sinking had given way to toilet sinking. At some point or another, I could no longer ignore the signs that something in the city had changed materially. Whatever windows of opportunity I'd hoped to climb through toward whatever creative career I had dreamed of were shattering rapidly, or were simply mirages to begin with. Then came lockdown. Events disappeared overnight, as did my participation in the music industry. I spent over 2 years in a miasmic void of numbness with total uncertainty. And at its peak, when it felt like the walls had closed all the way in, I could imagine no way out. That there would never be any going back to normal. What I couldn't tell you was if back to normal was something I wanted. I had spent so long rolling that boulder uphill, oftentimes for little more than the thrill of a good night, and those memories don't pay the bills. Here was my chance. I could just walk away. But I didn't. As San Francisco began to emerge from the social coma in the middle of 2022, perhaps the last major city in the US to do so, I began going out once again, if less than I used to, and I began co-producing a monthly party called Vague Terrain once again, starting over essentially from scratch. Going out was bewildering at first, a very particular flavor of deja vu that didn't exist pre-pandemic, folding in on itself amidst childlike wonder. But I struggled then, and struggle now, with a terrible sinking feeling that comes from bleeding money and toiling for hours producing an event only to walk away with little or nothing in your pocket to show for it. Putting on shows, especially the kind that I put on, isn't exactly work that you can retire on. I found myself asking the same questions as before. Why do I put in all this work? Why do I put up with the bullshit? Why do I still show up? I think back, as I often do, to those friends I lost on December 2nd, 2016. A fire during a rave in the Oakland warehouse ghost ship took the lives of 36 people. My friends counted dozens among the dead. I was at a DIY show at Jack London Square that night, about to head to the party until my friend Sarah sent me a burst of texts in a row. "There's a fire at Ghost Ship," she said. "It's bad, don't go." Immediately in its wake, I poured everything I had into telling their stories to anyone who would listen. I had never written an obituary before, but within 2 weeks, I wrote 4. I spoke on the radio and agreed to reporters' interview requests. I penned articles for newspapers and magazines in a meager attempt to correct the narrative that the event that night wasn't a commercially driven EDM concert, nor was it a drug-addled bacchanal, but a gathering of like-minded outsiders sharing their artistry with one another for its own sake. A year after the fire, I wrote a letter to my friend Johnny, a DJ and musician whom we lost that night. I've been thinking a lot about grief. Does it ever go away? I wrote. I know now that it does not. It just changes shape. Through a nonlinear process, acts of commemoration and mutual aid bridge the chasm of loss, osmosing anguish and despair into kinship, and eventually into celebration. Last year, we hosted Vague Terrain on the 7th anniversary of the fire, the first time that our standing monthly date ever landed on December 2nd. At first, we were uncertain how to proceed. Should we cancel the party, host a memorial? We decided to move forward, what those no longer with us would have wanted, and booked Nihar, friend and comrade, for a live performance, and Kiernan Laveau, a thrillingly talented selector from Pittsburgh, to close out the night. The mood was ecstatic, and when the lights came on, I remembered that in spite of all the bullshit to gather together, to find community in one another, between each other, matters so much more than we know. I am attuned now to a kind of gratitude. When a friend tells me that they had forgotten how vital it is to see so many other friends all at once, I bask in it. When another friend tells me that our party feels like an expression of our personalities, that who we are shines through in our booking and production, I revel in it. And at the end of the night, when a friend, drenched in sweat from dancing, tells me how much they needed that, I am aglow. This gratitude has always been there, of course. It's the fundament of the rave. It's something primal. Maybe today, though, it is more freely given, since it seemed, for a moment, that it could all disappear. So to answer my own rhetorical question, I am not yet too old for this shit, no. Someday maybe, but not today. I'll see you on the dance floor.